Well, what's up, guys? It's Ark here. The last video I made on DKs went very well. I've gotten a couple subscribers, a couple likes. I'm happy with how the video went. There's a few things I would wanted to add to it, but that's for a video in the future for when I do the Season 4 official guide. That's going to be like a 30-minute video. Um, so in this video, we're going to be talking about talents, tier sets, rotation, base gear, consumes, and then we'll head out with the outro. But first, let me introduce myself a little bit. I am a 22-year-old who lives in the state of Texas. I have achievements such as Keystone Hero, Keystone Master, in the last probably 4 to 5 seasons since Shadowlands. I've been playing the game since Kata. I have about 5-6 AOTCs. Right now, I'm currently progressing Mythic Smolderon. We are about 100 to 200 wipes in it, and we're at 48% on the boss. Outside of that, we can go straight into talents. Alright, now starting off with the DK main tree, we're going to go over raid first. Your raid build, your single target build. You're going to be, it's either going to be between Soul Reaper and Bomb Limb. It's really only two things you want to change in this build. Sometimes you want to take Blinding Sleep for the Farok boss to interrupt those elves. And Bomb Limb you also want to bring to Farok, but most single target fights are going to bring Soul Reaper. Now going on to the DK main tree. Main capstone talents, the important ones, are Apocalypse, Mages of the Dead, Army of the Dead, Unholy Assault, and then Summon Gargoyle is pretty much the main part of this build. This build is called the zombie build. It's like having your own major big army. Summon a gargoyle into the area, bombard the target for 25 seconds. You pretty much just cast like Shadow Bolt over and over again. This build can be kind of annoying if the boss moves too much. Like, say Farok, if the tank has to move the boss from one side of the room to the other, it will interrupt the gargoyle's cast. If the boss moves too far away from it, because it only has a 30-yard range. And then Commander of the Dead is also very important. Your Dark Transformation also empowers Gargoyle and Army of the Dead for 30 seconds, increasing their damage by 35%. This is a bat fucking ability. Back in Season 2, DKs were doing insane numbers.
Seconds, just about now, it just instantly drops. Right? Typhus here, he does so much damage. 5 million, 6 million. Boss is dead. It's just insane how well this scales. I'm not even sure Unholy is the best one here.
And Reaping is also an important ability. It pretty much turns your Soul Reaper, Scourge Strike, Festering Strike, and Death Coil into like execute abilities. They do more damage, and especially Soul Reaper doing probably like 200k damage on it. Alright, now we're going to go over the AOE build for Unholy. There isn't that big of a difference on the main tree for DK. It's just now you're not bringing AMZ because you can't coordinate with your group when to use it. But some high-end Mythic Plus DKs do bring it because they have a group that they play with. Blinding Sleep, an AOE stop is very good for Mythic Plus to interrupt casts, especially if everyone's interrupts are down. And Bomb Limb, all Mythic Plus dungeons you are bringing this. Some weeks you will be dropping Effiable for Control Undead. This is very important for Incorporeal CCing them. Hopefully you don't have to be the one to CC them because you do have to stop your rotation to cast this, and it also takes a rune. Now for like the main part of the Unholy tree, you have Epidemic, Unholy Blight, Defile, Apocalypse, Unholy Assault, and then Plague Plinger and Ebon Fever are all very important. I'm going to go over Epidemic. Epidemic is essentially just your Death Coil, but it's an AoE. It does very similar things to what your Death Coil does. Unholy Blight is your opener ability. Applies the dot, your main dot, Virulent Plague to nearby targets, but while also applying your Super Strain to other targets, which is also just your Frost Fever and Blood Plague. Defile is this build is either called the Defile build or the Disease build by DKs. I call it the Disease build. I personally hate Defile, but a lot of people do like playing around it. Tanks hate it, and I hate it. You have to learn how to manage this buff, essentially. You can kind of cheat it. Whenever the Death and Decay expires, you'll still have the buff like 3 seconds after. If you can like kind of min-max that 1 second, you can get another Death and Decay out and have the 8% buff for like, I think 40 seconds. I don't have the exact number on it, but you can have the buff for a very long time if you manage it well. But Super Strain and Mages of the Dead are the most important because of your tier sets. Now going over the tier set real quick, Apocalypse summons an additional Mages of the Dead. Your Mages of the Dead Shadow Bolt now fires a volley of Shadow Bolts. So Shadow Bolt volleys, just like some mobs cast, to 4 nearby targets. And now for your 4 set, each rune you spin increases the duration of your active Magi by 0.5 seconds. And your Magi will now cast Amplify damage and increases damage you deal by 5% for 10 seconds. At the beginning of Season 3, this was kind of nerfed. It was doing a shit ton of damage, and it still does a shit ton of damage. Let's see if I can get my SCADA or my recount. Was this it? Yeah, here you go. So Mages of the Dead Shadow Bolt did 4.5 million damage in this rotation, and it did 16% of my total damage. And Mages of the Dead did most of my damage. This was a 5 target cleave fight. Scourge Strike and Ebon Fever. Ebon Fever turns your outbreak ability into a rotational ability. You have to press it like every 10-12 seconds now. This build is pretty complex to upkeep with, especially in Mythic Plus. I prefer to play Frost DK, 200 build in Mythic Plus, but a lot of people also do prefer this disease build. I don't understand why. I think they're just psychopaths and they love pain. Now, starting with rotations, we're going to go over single target primarily for raid. Gargoyle is going to be the main ability. So essentially, this is what causes you to have to really manage your runic power very well, especially in your opener. The Gargoyle gains 1% increased damage for every runic power you spend. Gargoyle lasts 25 seconds, so you have to spend as much runic power and generate as much runic power as possible for 25 seconds. So you start with Outbreak, Army of the Dead, into Festering Strike, into Death and Decay, into Gargoyle, into spamming as much Death Coil as possible. The reason why you're using Death and Decay, I didn't mention this, is Unholy Ground. Then you want to press Apocalypse. If you don't have 4 Festering Ruins on the target, you can press Festering Strike again. It's up to you, really. I don't really know if 3 is really that much better or that much worse than 4. I'm not exactly sure. But just to be safe, you can press Festering Strike again. Into Dark Transformation, into Empowered Rune Weapon. There's 2 different spots you can use Empowered Rune Weapon. As soon as you summon Gargoyle, you can use Empowered Rune Weapon, or you can use it at the end of your opener. I have a macro down below for Empowered Rune Weapon that pops all the trinkets. It pops all your racials, all your pots, and everything. You can see we're going in. Very long-winded rotation. I use Empowered Weapon for the end of the ability or the end of the rotation, and then you just spam the shit out of your Death Coil. And as you can see, my Gargoyle right here is going off. The Mages of the Dead, they do a lot of damage because of your tier set. My Plague fell off there. Plague is for single target, it's not super important. It doesn't do a lot of your damage, but it is nice to keep it up. I'm pretty sure it generates a runic power every time it ticks. I'm not 100% sure on that though. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Then you just pretty much use your filler abilities: Festering Strike, Clawing Shadows, Death Coil, and then every 45 seconds press Apocalypse and Dark Transformation. And then every minute and 30 seconds, you can pop your Might of the Ocean again with Unholy Assault, with Apocalypse and Dark Transformation. But you could, if you have 4 strikes already on the target, you do not have to use Unholy Assault. Alright, now going into the Mythic Plus rotation, we're going to play some pre-recorded content. In Epidemics, your AOE Spender. That's all you really need to know about that. It's you typically want to use it in 3+ targets. And then going into Ebb and Fever, Virulent Plague deals 15% more damage over in half the duration. This turns Outbreak into a rotational ability. You have to reapply it like every 12 seconds, I'd say. And then going into Y, this is called the Disease Build Super Strain. It applies Frost Fever and Blood Plague, the other two specs main dots. So, as I said before, you want to open up with Unholy Blight, into Army of the Dead, into Embalm Limb, into a Festering Strike, into Dark Transformation, or into Defile, into Dark Transformation, into Apocalypse, into Empowered Wound Weapon, and whatever it's called, Unholy Assault. So yeah, that's a pretty long-winded rotation, plus your trinkets, plus your pots and all your pre-pots and all this other shit. I have a macro down below for when you press Army and when you press Empowered Wound Weapon, whichever one you prefer. It doesn't really affect your damage that much in between, but I do prefer to use my pot with my Empowered Wound Weapon just to get as much as I can out of it, because you're not going to be doing that much damage in the middle of your rotation. You'll be doing most of your damage after rotation's over, or slightly when you're done pressing all your rotational buttons, as you'll see later. So you're pretty much just getting things rolling. It's a lot of buttons, and as you see, my damage is going to keep climbing and climbing and climbing. So right there, I'm managing my Defile, keeping my 8% mastery stacked up. Reapplying your disease. I'm pretty bad at that right now. But as you see, I'm keeping Defile up. You can wait around 3 seconds after Defile expires to keep it as long as possible. If I was perfect at managing it, I would have been able to have another Defile there and keep my buff up. But as you see, I've been pretty bad with Outbreak. I've been a Frost nerd for the last couple weeks, but I have been playing single target Unholy versus Smolderon. And Unholy is really about managing your runes and your holy power. It's way more important than it is in Frost. But with the AOE build, you do find it kind of hard to spend all your resources and spend all your runes efficiently. So if you're overcapping on runes a little bit, it's fine. But if you're just spamming Scourge Strike in your Defile and you have like pretty much 200 overcapped runic power, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice, because Epidemic is the main source of your damage along with Virulent Plague. Besides that, that's all you really need to notice. A bit of a tip and tricks right there. Before we talk about the gear, we're going to talk about stat priority. So for stats, you usually want 30% crit, 30% haste, 70% mastery. 68 is when it starts to DR. There's diminishing returns when stacking mastery as a Unholy DK, so pay attention to that. And then you want usually 10% verse. And the way I personally get 30% crit is by using a crit file in most of my runs. But if you're progressing high, you'd want to use tip of the verse. So I would have to figure out a way to get more crit later on when it starts to become a little more important. And then usually for haste, I end up using a hollowing rune. Little tip and trick there. The best enchants are going to be right up here for the main remainder of the gear section. Alright, now going into base gear and items. We're going to start off with trinkets really quick. So the best dungeon to farm gear is going to sadly be Dawn of the Infinite. If you're going to run and spam mythic keys, due to your best trinket, your best on-use trinket is Mirrored of the Fractured Tomorrows. It's a 3-minute on-use trinket. It lines up very well with your army timers in Raid and in Mythic Plus. It gives you a shit ton of your highest secondary stat, which is like crit, haste, mastery, whatever is your highest. Mine right now is mastery, so therefore it'd give me mastery. So this would be your best on-use trinket. And a lot of other gear pieces that are really nice drop from here too, especially from Rise. The trinket drops from the later half of the dungeon called Rise. So what drops from here is one, two, three possible tiered pieces, a pretty decent weapon, plus your best trinket. So really good dungeon to run. And another pro tip, some people don't know this, go to your loot specialization. You right click on your character's name and just put unholy, so you can always get two-handers. One-handers are for frost, or a specific build in frost. So make sure your loot specialization is unholy. Mighty Ocean is also another good trinket. It gives you a bunch of main stat for 20 seconds with a 1 minute and 30-second cooldown. It lines up very well with Unholy Assault. I personally prefer this trinket over Fractured Tomorrows, over Fractured Tomorrow kind of being RNG sometimes. If you have too much haste, it'll give you haste. If you have too much crit, it'll give you crit. That shit's kind of annoying to me. Another good trinket from dungeons is Razan's Gleaming Eye. This is probably going to be, if you're just doing dungeons and no raid, this is going to be your best passive trinket from the raid. Your second best passive trinket is probably going to be something like Ember of Nullification if they're pushing high keys. But now we can move on to raid trinkets. The best raid trinket is going to be your Cataclysm Signet brand. Drops off a Smolderon. It's like a Kiss Curse ability. You take some damage, but you deal some damage back. Very high output for single target, but for AoE it's not so good. So for Mythic Plus it doesn't scale as well unless you're doing Tyrannica weeks. It could still be very useful. And then something like Pip pairs very well with something like Mirror Fracture Tomorrows. And then going on to big dick weapons. One really good weapon is the one I mentioned earlier, Gorehowl, Might of the Warchief, drops off of Rise, the second half of Dawn. Crit Mastery is a decent stat profile. You do need 30% crit. And Demon Bane just makes you do more damage to demons, so don't really pay attention to that. Another good weapon is a weapon that drops off a TOT. White Fen Axe, Crit Haste. You use both of the stats pretty well. And as for rings and such, you can pretty much just look at my gear. This is Biss. The Lariat is not so good right now. I'm just using it because I have 5 gem sockets. If you don't have 5 gem sockets, it's absolutely worthless. If you would want to, Allied Risk Guard of the Championship is going to be better than the Lariat, and Shadow Flame Patch will be better than the embellishment that I have here. Now going through consumables, this is going to be very quick. Deviled Eggs is your main primary food. Main stat, very good. Tippet of Verse is really good for progressing high-end content, but if you like the extra damage, Corrupting Rage Pot is going to be good, but beware, it's a Kiss Curse ability. You do take damage when using it, that's why I don't recommend it for progressive content. Oh god, this big fucker's coming towards me. We gotta hurry up. Hissing Rune is a rune. You attach it to your weapon. It gives you mastery for 2 hours. You big fucker, get away from me. Guys, if you stand... Oh. Damn, bro. I didn't know you were chill like that. My fault, OG. Okay. The Hollowing Rune. You also... Depending on what stats you need, 30, 30, 70 is ideal. You will adjust to that. Same thing with the Crit Rune. Buzzing Rune is crit. Hollowing is haste. And then Hissing is mastery. Draconic Rune. These are very expensive. I don't recommend you buy these if you're just progressing your gear. They're very expensive for little gain. Elemental Potions of Ultimate Power. These are your pots, your damage pots. And then your healing pots are going to be Dreammarker's Healing Potion. It restores 1,500 health. And then gives you a healing dot for 1,500 over the next 6 seconds. Very good. Avantis. I don't feel like explaining this right now because it'll take too long. And then Savory Deviate Delight to look like a fucking sick-ass pirate. Well, guys, that's it for this video. If you liked it, give it a like. If you like me, give it a sub. I will be having a new series coming out soon, Mythic Plus Tours. I will be giving a guide for every single Mythic Plus portal before the season ends. We have about 4 weeks left into the season before Season 4 drops, and then I'll make Mythic Plus guide videos for that as well, and then guides for the new raids. Besides that, guys, that's all I have going for me. Tell me how your day is going in the comments. I appreciate y'all. Goodbye. Also remember to follow the Twitch.